From CareCredit, it's Care Experts, a podcast where we dive deep into the health and pet care industry with the professionals that make it happen. I'm Antonio Diaz, and this is Logan. If your pet is constantly scratching, licking, or dealing with irritated skin, you are not alone. Skin allergies are one of the most common reasons pet owners visit the vet, and they can be frustrating to manage. From pollen and dust to food sensitivities and flea allergies, there are a lot of potential triggers. That's why we're sitting down with Dr. Matthew Wheaton, an experienced veterinarian and the chief of staff at Alicia Pet Care Center. He's treated countless pets with skin allergies and has some amazing advice for pet parents on identifying, managing, and preventing flare-ups. In this episode, we'll cover common causes of pet allergies, how to spot early symptoms, and the best treatment options to help your pet feel comfortable in their own skin. Dr. Wheaton, I'm so excited to have you here. I can't wait to dive into skin allergies and talk about all the things that people can do to help prevent them and deal with them on a day-to-day basis.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Before we get into that, I want to start with a little icebreaker. I've got a quick question game for you. We're going to call it, What's Causing the Itch? And so we'll jump right in. So a little bit of trivia, if you will. So a dog won't stop licking its paws, especially after walks. The itching seems to get worse in the spring and fall. What do you think is causing that?
Oh, I know this one.
I know you do.
That's going to be seasonal allergies. Boom. That's really like atopic dermatitis or environmental allergy in dogs.
Okay. Do you think, so elaborate on that, the environmental, is it like, my first thought is pesticides in the grass or something like that. Am I right in assuming that, or is it a little different?
Probably not, to be honest with you. The pesticides are a thing that's always around us for sure, but the bigger issue there is a genetic disease called atopic dermatitis that's passed down from generation to generation and causes them to be hyper-reactive to the environment that they're kind of coming in contact with by breathing in, mostly, also potentially by touch, and then they're mounting this abnormal inflammatory response.
Okay. All right, next one. A cat has scabs and hair loss near its tail. It spends time both indoors and outdoors. What could be causing the problem?
Mm-hmm. So outdoor cat in a lot of the United States that's doing it like that, it's probably going to be an allergy to flea bites. Okay. That's a really common problem causing that kind of thing. And one flea can keep them itchy for up to 3 weeks.
No way.
Yeah.
3 weeks?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, roughly like how many fleas would be on? I'm assuming not just one of them jumps on a cat or a dog.
Probably not just one, but oftentimes they are, chewing on themselves and swallowing the fleas. So a lot of times you won't really see the evidence. You just see the itchiness.
Gotcha. Next one, a dog has developed hot spots and won't stop scratching, but the owner insists they haven't seen a single flea.
So again, it could be fleas. Yeah. It's possible. That flea situation is the same with dogs as it is with cats. If they have an allergy to the flea bites, it's the saliva and the flea that's kind of creating that immune response. That dog could be very, very itchy. Hot spots can happen just from really all three of those allergies, fleas, food, and the world.
Gotcha.
The world is that environmental allergy.
Yep. And last one, a cat has itchy skin with hair loss, and the symptoms seem to get worse in the days after cleaning the litter box.
Yeah, it's possible that it has something to do with the litter box. So we do sometimes see cats, especially having contact dermatitis. So exposure to whatever it is, the chemicals in the litter, it's possible that could be the case. They sometimes will get the atopic dermatitis too, the environmental allergy, and so it could be that too.
Gotcha. One thing I'm noticing about as you answer these questions, and I can relate to this, when people present an issue with dogs behaviorally or training wise, they're looking for like a single question. And a lot of times it's like, it depends. There's a lot of potential reasons, things that will cause similar symptoms. So there's really like a fact finding process that we have to get to.
Definitely.
Which I personally love, and I'm sure you do too. And on that topic, I would love to hear more about how you started to specialize in, let's say, skincare, skin allergies within your practice, and how that all started for you.
I mean, you better get good at it if you're a small animal doctor, because it's half of your day every day.
Wow.
At my practice, Alicia Pet Care Center, we see probably 20 dogs per day, every single day, with allergy-related issues, ear infections, skin infections, itch. And if you don't get good at it, then you're just not going to be a really good doctor, because
Fair
that's
enough.
most of what you're going to end up seeing.
Gotcha. When I hear skin allergy, personally, I think of a temporary situation. And more so, I think because seasonal allergies, things like that, or it can be obviously long term if it's a consistent thing in like environmental. But would you say that there's a difference between a skin allergy and a disease, like a skin disease? And like what would be a determining factor? If a dog has or a cat has a constant allergy to something, would it be fair to label that as a disease?
I think maybe, but if it's fleas, everything's going to be fine as long as we recognize what the problem is and we're using something that's truly effective at killing the fleas. That's something that you could put away, semi-permanently, just by stopping the fleas from biting. The food allergy, again, also possible, because if you change the diet to the new diet and you avoid the trigger protein, then also you could move away from that problem, and it ends up being kind of a managed condition because you're not actually embracing the problem anymore. The atopic dermatitis, we can't really escape the world. So if we have the genetic predisposition to mounting an inflammatory response against allergens in the world, that patient's going to have a hard time avoiding getting treated for it. They're going to have a potentially lifelong struggle.
Gotcha. And on the topic of diet, is it difficult for most people to adhere to an elimination diet for their dog? And is that something that you would normally recommend to deal with a potential dietary issue?
We do recommend that, and we recommend doing that relatively early, just in case it is that issue. A lot of people think that that's a very, very common source of the allergy issue, but truly it's probably only in the like 5 to 10% of all of our allergic pets. So it is hard for them to stick with a diet trial, because of course you want to give the treat, the dog is begging, something falls off the counter, you've got kids in the house. It's sometimes really hard to keep a dog on a single source protein.
Okay. Do skin allergies on dogs cause them to have a smell?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The allergy, not in and of itself, but the allergy will typically drive a lot of inflammation. Then your immune system kind of breaks down, gets distracted by, mounting this excessive immune response. And then the defense goes down. And then you have bacteria and yeast that normally live on a dog's skin that now start to overgrow. Then you have the smell associated with a bacterial or a fungal infection that's going to definitely off gas.
Okay. So the allergy itself can actually cause the fungal infection.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Are there breeds that you think, in your experience, are more prone to skin allergies?
Definitely. So this again kind of goes into that genetic bucket, right?
Okay.
So a lot of these allergy issues in dogs are genetically based and hard to avoid, but we have certain, breeds that are very known, notorious offenders. French bulldogs are like the number one.
I was gonna say
right?
bulldogs and pitties would be my guess. I was like excited for you to answer.
Bulldogs, pitties, labs, golden retrievers, terriers, but all of the bully breeds, French bulldogs, pugs, Boston terriers, all of those guys are going to have a really high predisposition. Notice on the French bulldog, the more refined our breed gets and the more kind of fancy and special it gets with its unique characteristics, the more inbreeding actually is happening to make that happen. So now you have a narrow gene pool, and you start to have all these genetic problems associated with that.
It's just like making carbon copies of the same problem.
Exactly.
Over and over. What medications do you typically utilize to address skin allergies in your practice?
So there are like 5 different treatment options for the atopic dermatitis dog. Again, food and fleas, they're all going to be a little bit different on the nuance, but we can use lots of different things to decrease the itch. A very common one used now is Cytopoint, which is really cool, biologic treatment that's not technically medication, but that's an injection that is an antibody against the main contributing factor to itch, interleukin 31, if we want to get deep here. But it takes that kind of out of the system temporarily, and that really quickly diminishes the itch, and one shot can sometimes give a dog months of relief.
Oh, wow.
We have pills too. Apoquel is the kind of common one. It works similarly. It's a JAK enzyme inhibitor, so it's tweaking a very small portion of the immune system makes it so that the dog can still stay immunocompetent. You know, we're not going to have immunosuppressed dogs, but we're going to have a lot less inflammation and itch associated with the use of that medicine.
Okay. I want to touch back really quick because when we talked about diet, you recommend a fresh diet, and I love hearing that. Since you're in front of me, I have to ask this question. When my Shepherd Brooklyn was about 6 months old, I noticed that on the top of her muzzle, she started to have like, her skin started to just fall out, I guess. She never scratched at it, but I just noticed this little spot. And I had done a little research and read about how beneficial eggs could be for a dog's skin. So every day I fried up 2 eggs for her, scrambled them up and fed them to her. And within 2 weeks, it was completely gone. I'm just curious because I'd never asked anybody, what do you think could have caused that situation?
So I'd say 3 things. You're giving an incredible source of amino acids, right? With the eggs, you're getting great amino acids that can be really helpful for the skin barrier.
Okay.
2, you're giving a lot of omega-3s. So most eggs these days are kind of fortified with omega-3 fatty acids. Those are going to be anti-inflammatory, so it's going to decrease inflammation, improves the skin barrier, lots of research on that. The third thing is just basically overall better nutrition.
Okay.
When you're feeding your dog kibble, it's a highly processed food. It's, with nothing that we would ever eat as humans.
Agreed.
The nutritive value of that kind of diet is going to be very low, and consequently, everything's going to kind of suffer, including the skin layer.
Gotcha. Assuming that someone's not paying a ton of attention to their dog, what are some symptoms that they could pick up on that their dog might have a skin allergy and need to come and see someone like yourself?
Good question. I think the big disconnect here is that people, I think, give too much slack to the dog that it's quote unquote normal for a dog to be a little bit itchy.
I totally agree.
I don't think there's any normal amount of itchiness. I think the baseline of itch for the normal dog is 0. And then, you kind of move away from that. Sometimes people don't even really recognize that itch behavior is itch behavior because they're not necessarily scratching outright or chewing themselves to bits. And we don't need it to be so severe to actually recognize that there's a problem. Basically, the first time that your dog turns its foot under and licks the bottom of its foot, it's probably telling you that it has an allergy right in that first moment, which is very concerning because that's so many dogs out there that have itchy paws and itchy faces. So I think a lot of that, you basically in a dog should assume that every behavior that they're doing to themselves is likely to be an itch behavior rather than they're grooming themselves like a cat, or they're fastidious about being clean, or they have a habit, or they're self-soothing, or whatever other thing that like may come to mind. It's really not about that. Dogs aren't really very good at grooming themselves. If they, step in sap or something like that, you'll find them really doing it, but they're not like a cat that's going to be, doing this as normal daily behavior.
Okay. I'm actually a little concerned right now. No, I'm serious because Logan he licks the top of his paw. I've never seen like any raspberry or anything like that, any redness. And to be honest with you, just knowing him, I've just always assumed that he does like, no, I could be wrong, but I've looked at it as cleaning himself because he's a very particular dog. He's a dingo, so he's very wild in nature. So I've never, and you can even see in his left paw right now, it's just a little bit wet at his wrist right here. You see that?
So the wrist is a specific area that brings a different thing into play, actually. So kind of a unique thing because most times when dogs are licking their paws, they're licking from itchiness, and it's going to be the underside of the foot primarily, but it can be the top too. But if you have a dog that's licking directly on their wrist and they're kind of focusing on the wrist, most of the time that's a self-soothing behavior from a dog that has, some degree of anxiety driving that behavior to happen. Boredom or anxiety. They can sometimes get the raspberry is a lick granuloma. The lick granuloma is like when you lick in the same spot over and over and over again, you're going to create a wound. And if it's at the wrist or at the ankle, that's typically kind of more of a psychological disorder. Not to say that your dog is crazy, because he's obviously not. He's an amazing dog.
Thank you.
But that can be the source of that.
Okay. Now, going back to the topic of medication, are there any supplements or like a holistic approach alternatives to medications, we'll call it like a chemical compound, that you would recommend from a preventative perspective or even like as a solution to a skin allergy?
So prevention, I think there's definitely things to talk about for sure that are actually real. I'm a pretty pragmatic vet, so I'm results oriented with my practice, and I have a hard time recommending things that, take time, money, and effort, but don't give a result.
Yep.
But on the prevention side, I think it starts with nutrition.
Okay.
That is where we should be starting pretty much every conversation about diseases. If you do better nutrition, everything's going to fall in line in a much better way. There's a lot of science behind that. So again, just improving the microbiome has been proven.
Okay.
The microbiome, not only of the gut, but also of the skin, that's scientifically proven with fresh food over kibble. Digestibility is going to be much better, so you just get a better nutrient flow. That I think makes sense. If anybody asks me, like, what is one supplement that I must give my dog, omega-3 fatty acids are always going to be my answer. Those are anti-inflammatory across the board, so everything that ends in itis is going to be helped somewhat by that.
Okay.
That's pretty much, counts for most of the diseases that are chronic illnesses in people and in dogs. But also it improves the skin barrier a lot. And so you just have that skin barrier being competent is really, really important to avoid bacteria and yeast getting down into the skin layer and causing a skin infection.
Okay.
So
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to touch a little bit more on diet because first of all, I'm a really big advocate of a fresh diet, even with my clients, although it's not necessarily my specialty or my lane, so to speak. But to me, it's kind of a no-brainer to feed natural food as much as possible. Do you have any recommendations just recommendations on food or specific foods that we can give to give the best skin? I know we talked about eggs, as I mentioned it, giving omega-3s. Some things that come to mind for me would be like salmon or other fish, fish oils. What else would you say could be a great benefit for dogs to prevent or deal with skin allergies?
So there's some specific ingredients that we can, focus on as something that you're looking for in the food that you're purchasing, or if you're making your food at home, potentially making sure that you're including those. So things that have heavy antioxidants that are safe for dogs, blueberries are a really great option there. Using some functional produce, basically, things like kale is also a good vegetable to include. Sweet potato is another one. It's got a good blend of different carbohydrates in it that can be helpful for balancing out the dog's diet. Again, on the meats, I think fish is a great choice because it has the automatic inclusion of omega-3s, and that is just honestly magic in a protein source. I think importantly, if you're feeding your own food at home that you're cooking yourself, ideally it's complete and balanced. If you're not doing that on your own, and if you are, hopefully you're working with your veterinarian or a nutrition team to actually make it complete and balanced. Otherwise, you're purchasing, one of these foods that's in that fresh pet realm.
Gotcha.
Ollie, Farmer's Dog, Just Food for Dogs. That's a local company here too as well. So all of those are really good options there. If we move beyond that, we're starting to go to kibble. We automatically immediately just drop down like so many levels because now we're dealing with a type of food that's just not going to be as robust nutritionally, but it also potentially includes inflammatory compounds, these advanced glycation end products, AGEs that are very pro-inflammatory for the dog in their gut and also for their overall immune system.
Okay. As far as when a dog has a skin allergy, would you recommend that it's time for somebody to take their dog to a specialist? Like, what's a determining factor for you? We're like, all right, this is more serious.
So if I can be a friend to the pet parents out there, I think, we should allow for our veterinarians to work through the problem as best they can. But I do think also we want to see results out of that. So I think, if we continue to keep going and banging our head against the wall, not getting a long-term solution that works, if we're frustrated with the care, I think those are really good times to reach out and, ask for a referral to a specialist.
Okay.
I think that's kind of the thing. Being a very results-oriented practitioner, I want to make sure that my client is actually getting the results that they're looking for, that the patient is not suffering. Most of us will basically recognize like this is not the case that's going well for me, and I need to have a bigger brain on it, and somebody else's eyes, and off you go to the specialist.
Gotcha. So in the home, in my personal experience, having worked with a lot of clients, I know that there can be some environmental allergies within the home themselves. For example, I had a client many years ago where when I walked in the house and I was doing consultation, I noticed that their dog had a lot of mucus coming from her nose. And they had no idea what was going on. It'd probably been a couple of days. And I had asked them what detergent they were using for the dog's bed because I noticed that the dog was laying on the bed. And I had asked them, how often is she on the bed? So I ended up smelling the bed and I could smell the perfumes coming from the bed itself. I had recommended that they contact their vet, but in the meantime, that they not let the dog on the bed and maybe have her sleep or lay on something that hadn't been washed. In your experience, is this a common issue with, I would say, chemical laden products and things like that in the home, like scented this, scented that, and plugins and all that?
It's definitely a real issue. The overall exposure to chemicals that dogs, cats, and people have, it doesn't need to be this way anymore.
Agreed.
So I definitely talk with people about just bringing down the baseline of exposure to chemicals that are going to do this, that, or the other thing, or some unknown risk that you actually don't even really realize what's happening. Yeah. It's really great to kind of just clean that whole category up so that you're starting from fresh. Minimal chemicals are going to be a best way to go forward with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's definitely an uptick in the amount of chemicals that are in products, but at the same time, in my experience, a degree of awareness that's also on the uprise from people that are starting to understand that this stuff is not good for us, our pets, and honestly not needed at all to live a great, happy, and healthy life for that matter.
There's plenty of products out there that do exactly the same thing with less hormone blockers, carcinogens, all these other chemicals that are going to do something to our bodies that we don't entirely understand. We don't really have to embrace them anymore. So I do recommend that we just don't live in that way if we can avoid it.
I love it. What tips would you give for somebody that is preparing for seasonal allergies with their dog?
Well, preparation is difficult to avoid the world, right? So you just got to kind of hope that your dog does not have this problem. But if your dog has had a problem before and you're kind of expecting spring or fall to bring this, new challenge, I think, you do what you can. You control what you can. So you could try to wipe the paws, clean the paws after walks. You could use an air freshener an air cleaner, an air filter in your house. That's like one of those actual real air filters. Those things are crazy. Like when you take the filter out,
how that like black they are.
How dirty is the air that we breathe? Crazy. It's really amazing. So that can sometimes help by taking some of those environmental allergies out of the home. Beyond that, I think you're, being very vigilant, watching your dog really closely, not waiting too long, because sometimes people wait a little longer than they should. They see the dog itching a little bit and then the itch increases and they're really, really hopeful. And then next thing you know it, you've got ear infections and skin infections, and it's a whole big thing where the hot mess has to kind of be cleaned up. And that's really frustrating. Plus it's expensive to manage. Yeah. So I think early intervention is really good. Preparation for the allergy issue is to try to minimize overall inflammation in the dog by, again, trying to feed a diet that's going to be a low allergen diet for that dog, good nutrition.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, Dr. Wheaton, we're going to jump into the Ask Me Anything portion, one of my favorites. We've got some questions from our viewers. First one I have for you is, I've heard our pets can be allergic to us in the same way that we can be allergic to them. Is that true?
It can, yes.
What?
Dogs can have, and cats too can have allergies to human dander. Dogs can also have allergies to cat dander. So the whole setup could potentially be triggering the dog. And that, again, is kind of like goes into that environmental allergy. It's not the allergens that are the problem. It's the dog's genetics that are the problem that make it hyperreactive to those things. But certainly human dander and cat dander can be massive contributors to itch.
That's crazy. I can't imagine my dog being allergic to me. So hold on. I want to clarify this. Let's just say that Logan's allergic to me. What would that look like for him? Is it going to be a skin allergy? Is it going to be like an ear infection, or how would that look?
It's going to be skin allergy. So it's going to be, the same kind of thing. Itchy face, itchy paws.
I see.
Predisposition to ear infections, maybe skin infection stuff from, traumatizing the skin, of that.
Have you ever answered someone's question like, what's my dog allergic to? And you're like, You.
I have actually.
It's you, no
I
way.
have actually. And we do allergy testing on dogs sometimes to kind of try to figure out exactly what they're allergic to so we can turn around and give them desensitization injections.
Okay.
That's one of the potential treatments that we can do. And it'll test for human dander every time. It's always on that panel.
Oh, wow.
So sometimes it's crazy. Like your human dander is the highest allergen for this dog. Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I'd be pretty upset about that.
A lot of vacuuming.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. I would have never thought that they would be allergic to us. All right. Next question. I found out my dog is allergic to chicken. Does that mean he's also allergic to chicken flavored treats and foods?
That's a great question and a confusing one, but it depends on what the chicken flavor actually is. So we've got a lot of artificial flavors that can be in there. So depending, on what kind of product that they're using, if it's an artificial flavor, they're not really getting, obviously that speaks to the product that they're actually using, which we probably don't want in general.
Agreed.
But it's typically the protein that's the problem. So if there's no protein from it, if it's artificial flavor, it's probably not going to trigger the dog.
Okay.
If it's actually chicken protein and the dog is allergic to chicken and it's got some flavor in it, but it's actually a part of the chicken, the protein will potentially be a trigger for that dog. And it doesn't have to be a lot.
I was just going to say that would even potentially then include a chicken byproduct.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Because
chicken fat, not so much. So the fat is not a trigger. It's the protein. It's all about how big the molecule is.
Okay.
Protein molecules are really big. Size matters in regards to the immune system. So the bigger the thing is, the more likely it's going to trigger the immune system.
Okay. Great to know. Yeah, it makes sense that the flavoring isn't necessarily have the proteins in it. Okay, next question. I've been using this expensive hypoallergenic shampoo for my dog's skin allergies, but she seems even itchier after baths. What are some things I can look for in shampoos and conditioners to help with sensitive skin?
That's a great question. There's so many products out there. It just seems like there's a dozen more every single day.
Yeah.
So, and they all have their own little angle.
Usually it's oatmeal, I see.
Yeah, colloidal oatmeal is a really good choice. That's a very soothing, calming, kind of tamp down some of that heat in the skin. Also, actually, just the way that you bathe your dog matters. So using kind of cool water on the rinse is really important. Just the more heat you add, the more inflammation you're going to kind of hypercharge.
Yeah.
And contact time is really important too. So if you're using a medicated shampoo or something like oatmeal that's supposed to be kind of cooling the skin, you want to leave it on there for a little while. So 5 minutes minimum, potentially up to 15 minutes where the dog is kind of sitting lathered up in the tub and you're not rinsing it off right away. That allows for it to actually penetrate into the skin layer and you get a lot bigger benefit.
Okay. Do conditioners matter? There's always like a conditioner involved and...
Sometimes they can trigger dogs. It depends what's in the conditioner, but there are some conditioners that are specifically made to kind of calm down the inflamed skin.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I noticed my cat is having some acne around their chin. Could this be a skin allergy?
It's not really a skin allergy if it's truly chin acne, but it is typically associated with a contact allergy. So that has to do with the dreaded chemicals leaching out of whatever it is, oftentimes a plastic dish. You'll notice on that cat, it's very interesting. It's a very defined line of where that chin acne is going to happen. And if you watch the cat go into the water dish, it's going to have a little bit of moisture on the bottom of its chin. It has to kind of sink its chin down into the water. So those chemicals, we know this happens, leaches into the water, then that's irritating to the cat's skin, causes inflammation. The cat's acne then, rolls out from that. But it is not really a real allergy. Most of the time that is something that can be resolved just by switching over to stainless steel bowls, which are not nearly as cute. And maybe sometimes not as functional when we have the water fountain thing going. That's typically always plastic. But that can definitely be a thing for certain cats.
Would giving them filtered water be another step in that process and eliminating that potential? Because I know you mentioned chemicals and sometimes tap water, depending on where you live.
It can be, depends on where you are, depends on whether you have a water filter in your house and things like that. But I think filtered water is always a good idea.
Okay, same. So next question, I'm obsessed with hairless cats lately, and I'm seriously considering adopting one. Since they don't have fur as protection, are hairless cats more prone to skin allergies or irritations? And what should their skincare routine actually look like to prevent problems? And just for fun, I want to throw dogs in there because there are hairless dogs out there too. So we'll add them to the mix.
Okay, so the hairless cat is it's kind of like the French bulldog story. So these are very genetically refined breeds.
Okay.
And because of that, they bring with them all of their baggage, genetic baggage that comes with, the genetic defect that creates the hairless individual.
Yeah.
Oftentimes will have a carryover to several other defects.
Okay.
So it is very common for our hairless cat breeds to be much more likely to be atopic dermatitis cats, which we don't see very often in kitties because most of our cats are, nicely mixed with their genetics.
Yes.
Very different from our dog population in the US, where our dog population, most of them are breeds. Even if they are mixed breed, they're typically mixed with like multiple purebred dogs.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these genetic things flow from that. And then you've got the allergy again. My experience with the hairless dogs actually has not been so bad as far as the allergies go. Some of them can be allergic, but I don't think that they're necessarily all that much worse than the typical breeds that we've already mentioned.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you. Well, Dr. Wheaton, you've been a wealth of information. I mean, seamlessly answering questions. Greatly appreciate your time and your expertise and your knowledge. Really, really appreciate everything we talked about today.
Love it. I love helping people, and this is what it's all about for me. So thank you.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't leave yet. I just want to say, if you want to hear more about health and pet care, check out these episodes of Care Experts. Also, before you go, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. New episodes drop every Wednesday. You don't want to miss it.